By the time we got to 2015, 2016, Masters Users Classics had put out quite a lot, but fans weren't done yet. And even though Mattel was wrapping up interest in the line, there was another company that came along, Super 7, which honestly was the best possible thing. Now, Super 7 got two things when they took over the line. One, ideally access at the existing tooling, and two, access at the existing sculptors, the Four Horsemen. Now, I'm only going to be going over the classic figures, not the Filmation Grayskull one, since that's the theme of this Director's series. So let's kind of jump in to see what Super 7 did. And the first thing they did when they took over the brand from Mattel was very smart. Put out the main characters. You should always do this. This is what every toy company should be focusing on. Now, the Ultimates, as they dubbed these, and these were the first Ultimates that Super 7 made, it actually became a sub-brand for them that they applied to a ton of pop culture licenses and make some amazing figures. They're a little pricey, but that's understandable. They have low runs. Now, while putting out the main characters is definitely a good idea when a new company takes over, because you want to make these characters available again for fans and newcomers, well, one of the issues was that they included a lot of piece count from the Mattel line that originally was meant to reward long-time subscribers, if you will. And while it was cool to get lots of pieces at once, like Keldor's cape and the Demo Man head, or with Tila, they reissued all of the possible heads and all of the possible hair colors, so you got, blonde head and red head. There was some newness, but I also kind of felt things like the He-Man head that came with Ular was for the subscribers. It was a reward, and to be able to get that in another way, I felt was a bit of a kick to the subscribers. But hey, they also did Ram Man in mini comic colors, and can't really hold that back, because this was something that we had planned. We just never got around to it. So we being the team at Mattel. Either way, great to get these characters out again. I was a little iffy on the piece count, giving some pieces that really were meant to reward long-term, fans or, customers of the line, like the alternate He-Man head. But hey, Ram Man in orange is great. And as I said, while I've had my issues with Super 7 over the years with their Ultimates and maybe how they market them with piece count, you can go see my video about Robin Hood for that one. But the point being is, overall, they do excellent, excellent, excellent work. And again, while the figures are expensive, it's understandable because it's a very, very low run, and that's what should be. Mattel could absorb some of that because it's such a large company, but they also didn't have access to the tooling that Super 7 did because of low overhead, and we'll go into that. All right, so let's look at the two waves of classic figures that they put out. And it's almost a shame they only got to two waves because, again, they had access to almost unlimited tooling only because they have such a low overhead. They could afford it, as opposed to Mattel could not. So another one of those advantages. The first figure that Super 7 put out was Fangor, and man, look at that piece count. Would you even see a basic figure at retail with count like that? Now, Fangor is a figure that's especially important to me because, well, I'm the co-creator of Fangor. This was a character I created with Wellington in the first run of mini-comics. It was the third mini-comic that he appeared. And then Axel did a drawing of him to kind of show what he could look like as an actual action figure. And so I guess Axel's maybe the third co-creator. Now, in the mini-comics, we dropped in all these characters in the background, like the Great Black Wizard and Provis. And there you can see in the very back behind the Snake Man was another character. Now, this was basically just meant to expand the Snake Man armory, but fans wanted to know who this was. Well, this was Fangor, and the idea was that his vintage figure would have had fangs that came in and out of his mouth. That would have been his action feature. So it's cool that they had two heads, one with the fangs in, one with the fangs out. That's exactly how I would have proposed doing this. What's even crazier to me is the fact that Fangor now has multiple figures. For a character that was literally made up to fill in space in the mini-comic to show the Snake Man had more characters, it amazes me that there's now more than one Fangor out there. All right, so let's leave him as is, but great figure, and move on to the next in their first lineup, which was Lodar. Now, Lodar was the only figure in the Super 7 first wave that was actually sculpted at Mattel. It was sculpted to be part of the 2016 line, but was dropped. You can see him on the original B sheet. He was, August's figure, I think, there, next to Darius and Krita, who did get released. So Lodar was sculpted by the Horsemen. He was never released at Mattel. So Super 7 sort of got a free, already sculpted sculpt that they could then make into a figure with minimal tooling. So, a little controversial because of the whole chains and the sort of S&M angle on that cover of 1980 3 mini-comic, but it's great to have Lodar on the line. He was one of those original mini-comic characters like Geldor that just felt like he should be part of the line. And again, he was slotted to be part of the 2016 line, but got bumped when the new team that took over cut the line in half. All right, next up from New Adventures, we have Quake, which was a shock to me because, again, he's like a fully tooled figure. And this was what first made me realize, oh, Super 7 can afford to do a lot more tooling because they're a smaller company. This is why companies like Super 7 should be making collector-based product and not large companies, because large companies like Hasbro Mattel are compromised by overhead and by many, many other factors that don't affect small companies that can be a lot more nimble. It's kind of like a aircraft carrier versus a speedboat. Think of it like that. So the next figure was Hawk. This is a character from both Filmation and the 2000X series, and she made appearances sort of in the mini-comics. The thing is, the female Stratos mate slash girlfriend slash buddy has had a lot of looks over the years. And in particular, both Hawk and Delora being from the mini-comic, were kind of the same character with different heads, and I love that Super 7 just did this. They just offered both heads. You can make 2 different characters that share the same basic body. Great. Awesome. My only issue is that it looked a little bit too animated. Not enough detail, which I think they did to make it blend in with the animated line, the Club Grayskull. So while it looks a little bit more animated than, I think I would have, you could have put some scribe lines in the hair. I think that would have helped. All right, let's move on to Wave 2, their last and final wave. More's the pity. I would have loved more Super 7 Masters of the Universe Classic figures. Granita, awesome, was character, the last of the Rock Warriors, although there was Peblos and Boldar, who appeared in, was it a mini-comic or a storybook? Either way, there were some other Rock Warriors out there. But Granita, because she appeared in She-Ra, the animated series, along with Rockon and Stondar, is a character fans have wanted for decades. And it's so cool to finally see a figure of her. And she was released as a basic figure, because Rockon and Stondar had to be deluxe figures because of all of the armor. Again, huge, huge props to Super 7 for pulling this off. And look at how, even though she's animated, she doesn't look as animated as Hawk did. Last up in their second wave is Karg. Actually, not last up, second to last up. No, third to last up. Oh my god, I'm totally losing track. All right, Karg is from the 1987 movie and was the only figure that Mattel never made of Skeletor's new crew. And because of that, we didn't have access to him. We could only make figures that had figures from the vintage line. We didn't have access to the figures from the movie. We didn't have rights to the movie. So my Warner Brothers at the time. I don't know how Super 7 was able to do this and then redeco it in the William Stout collection. I think it's because they were working directly with William. Again, I wasn't privy. I know Mattel, we were not allowed to do this figure. We had no rights to it. So how Super 7 was able to negotiate this, I'm guessing it was because they went through William instead of Mattel. I don't know. This would be a question for Super 7. But, they made him, and that's awesome. And they also really spent their tooling. So all these characters, like the next one up, Dial-A-Mug. Get it? Dial a mug, like dial up a face, because he has a dial on his face that you can make different expressions. Again, a 100% fully tooled figure that, while Mattel, we absolutely talked about doing him. He's very popular among the fans. We knew he was going to be a fully tooled figure, which meant we had to build a year of partially tooled figures to afford kind of the 1 or 2 fully tooled, like Ram Man back in the day. So again, huge pluses to Super 7 right out of the cartoon, like literally out of the cartoon. I mean, you could recreate this character and everything worked, from the beam on his head to the dials on his face. Huge, awesome, cool figure, fully tooled. Could not have happened at Mattel, or at least it would have taken a full year of partially tooled figures to offset the cost of a Dial-A-Mug. So also a major reason I'm so glad that Super 7 took over the line, because they have access to a lot more tooling without the overhead that Mattel has. Hopefully, maybe they'll even take it over again. Who knows? Could classics come back? Super 7's probably the best way. While Dial-A-Mug didn't come with his pie, he was great. Now we are to the last figure, Rap Trap. This is one that's really interesting to me. So I think if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you know that I have a thing for Egypt. I also teach hieroglyphics. I traveled to Egypt after college. I was a big proponent of putting Nephthys into the line because he's got an Egyptian theme. You would think I would also want to have another villain knowing that I'm a huge fan of the Horde, who's also Egyptian themed. Well, why didn't we do a figure that's fan demanded and one that I personally would have loved to make? I mean, come on, the Horseman gave him a scarab crossbow. The reason being is, despite the fact that he's got everything going for a MOTUC figure and a member of the Horde, Mattel did not have rights to make him. How did Super 7 make him? I don't know. And let me explain why we didn't have rights to make this figure, despite the fact that fans have been creating, artwork and concepts for how this character could have been a figure for years. He first showed up, well, this isn't his first appearance, this is his colored appearance in the non-licensed Power and Honor collection book that came out about 15 years ago. But the image originally was shown publicly in Tomar's Action Figure Digest, specifically this issue here that featured an extensive look at MOTUC characters and concept art that was never made into figures. And a lot of this does show up in some of the other licensed and unlicensed concept books. Now, Rat Trap, or Mummy Man, or whatever he was going to be called, was one of these figures, and the thing is, Mattel had no proof that this design was done at Mattel and not in this employee's off time. Because of that, because we didn't actually have a record of this figure in our archive, it was considered, well, we can't prove this figure was designed at Mattel. It could have been designed in this employee's, off time. He may have just been doodling at home and then sent these images into Tomar's. Probably he did them at Mattel. But because we didn't have that paperwork trail and we couldn't prove it, we didn't have the right to make this figure. Super 7 jumped at it because, well, their logo is a mummy. And I'm sure they saw this as a cool way of having a Masters of the Universe Classics figure that basically was very similar to their logo, which they've already done many times as, action figures and Funkos and all sorts of things. I mean, hey, if you had a mascot, you'd want it in every line too. So it makes sense why they would focus on this. It was off limits for Mattel, but Super 7 did it. How they did, maybe it's one of those sort of don't ask, don't tell things. You'd have to ask them.